legislative advocacy and the DSP crisis today. And before we get into a recap of February's meeting, I thought I would have Anne reach out to everyone and welcome you all.
Yes, I'm so happy to do that. And as I said, I'm thrilled that so many people were able to join us today. Welcome, everybody. And we are so excited to be sharing with you details and information about the DSP workforce crisis. The reason why it's exciting to be able to share this information with you is because we are all in a position to make a difference and to help solve the crisis. And we are going to talk about what the crisis is and how we can help. So we're a really diverse group of advocates today, which is also exciting to see, just the diversity in our group. I know we have some parents in our audience who are navigating the evaluation, diagnosis, and or special education processes for their young children who have developmental disabilities. There are some family members supporting their transition age or adult loved ones with disabilities as those loved ones pursue independent living resources and opportunities in their communities. So living arrangements where they're able to enjoy greater degrees of independence, supported living situations, perhaps higher education, and just enjoying life in their communities as members of those integrated communities. We have some self-advocates with developmental disabilities joining us today. They are advocating for the supports that they need to live, work, study, and enjoy life with independence in their communities. We have some paid professionals from the ARC, including coordinators, directors, and direct support professionals who work to provide supports and services to people with developmental disabilities so that they can live more independent and inclusive lives. And many of us here today play more than one role. We may be parents as well as paid professionals. We may have kids in the special education process and adult children living in our communities. So we have such a great diversity of perspectives to learn from today, and we're going to be inviting some of you to join us in our discussion as it progresses. So our topic today, as we've said, is the DSP workforce crisis. Some of us have heard about this, some of us may have not heard about it yet, but if we have loved ones with developmental disabilities, or if we are self-advocates with developmental disabilities, we have all either been affected by this workforce crisis or will be affected by it. So we are here to learn how we can help, what we can do to improve our situation. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ann Mangelsdorf, who's going to be actually, this is my part, I think, talking about, I'm going to recap from February. What is an advocate? We're all advocates here today. And an advocate is anyone who defends, promotes, or supports the rights and interests of an individual group. A self-advocate is a person who defends, promotes, or supports one's own rights and interests. An advocate, whether a self-advocate or somebody who's advocating for or with another person, can provide personal, individual, or legislative support on behalf of or alongside another person or group. And they can help to educate their communities, to raise awareness, inform others about issues, history, progress, and to help determine further priorities and actions. So they're building upon progress that's happened thus far and then furthering causes and progress into the future. Next slide, Anne. And so we advocate for a number of different reasons to ensure that we or others are treated fairly and that our rights are protected, and to maintain progress, as I said, that has been made and to make further progress. We don't want to rest on our laurels after having achieved progress and important legislative milestones. We don't want to rest on our laurels and not make sure that certain legislation is being implemented well and that it's furthered. So now I'm going to hand it over to Anne Mangelsdorf, who is going to give us a little bit of background on the DSP crisis, what a DSP is, and how to solve the crisis.
Thank you, Anne. So what we're asking the legislature for today is $86 million for developmental disabilities rate standardization. And this means that community service providers like the St. Louis ARC and others would be able to compete for and retain qualified direct support professionals by being able to pay them a fair and competitive wage that reflects the rising minimum wage and as well as inflation and cost of living. So we really want to be able to pay our direct support professionals more than minimum wage. So what is a DSP? A direct support professional, or a DSP, is an essential health worker that works to support people with developmental disabilities to live and work with independence in their communities. Direct support professionals provide personal care assistance, behavioral supports, functional supports, coaching, skills building, crisis intervention, prevention. They often are seen as surrogate family members for individuals with disabilities, and they do a wide range of activities. One of the things that I would love to do at this point is we do have some people who are DSPs on the call today. And if you would like to talk a little bit about your experience as a DSP, I know that I'm going to call out to Eli if he would like to talk a little bit about what DSP is and what kinds of things you're currently doing as a DSP, Eli.
Yeah, so I was a DSP for about a year and a half before I moved to St. Louis. And I essentially just provided those direct care supports to the people I worked with inside of the residential homes. So I worked with hygiene, help them prepare foods, help them with their meds, and basically just kind of help them reach the goals that they set out to have to live the most independent life that they could. And a lot of it was focused more on those direct supports, where I was like physically helping with a lot of the hygiene, like bathing and going to the bathroom and stuff like that. And I also did a lot more like medical stuff as well. I had to learn how to do like NG tubes and G tubes, and learn how to take blood sugars and stuff like that as well. So it was just kind of a little bit of a mix of everything there.
I really appreciate you bringing up some of those issues and supports that you provide, Eli, because I think it's really important for people to realize that some of the supports that people with disabilities receive are very, very intimate. So bathing and going to the bathroom and having your NG tube changed are pretty personal things. And if you can imagine getting to know your direct support professional and getting to trust them and they get to know you, and then pretty soon you have somebody brand spanking new that you have to start over with again and again because of turnover. And then here you are in a situation where you are having to share some very, very personal information and details and care with other people. So that's just another piece that I think is really important for legislators to know, is how personal the care can be for your family member or for the people that you're providing care for. So what is the crisis about? And
Yes. So the crisis, as we have suggested by a couple of details that we've mentioned so far, is that there is a lot of turnover in DSP staff that work with individuals with developmental disabilities. And there is also a shortage in our workforce. So currently in Missouri, around 25,000 people with IDD, intellectual and developmental disabilities, receive supports and services of some kind. And around 8,000 of those receive residential supports so that they may live, work, learn, enjoy life in their communities with independence. So like anybody else in life, we all rely on others for support. None of us is a completely independent individual who doesn't need the support of other people, family members, friends, community members, or professionals in order to live. We rely on doctors, we rely on accountants, plumbers, all sorts of people who support us in living independently in our communities. And the same is true for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. In certain areas, they will be able to live independently to greater degrees, and in other areas, they may need more supports and services. Fortunately, our society over the past several decades has moved away from institutionalization and towards the provision of home and community-based services, also known as HCBS, and consumer-directed services, CDS, that support individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities to live full lives with independence and in their communities. And this is a great thing. And the United States government and legislature has formalized the integration of people with IDD into their communities by passing legislation such as the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 and the Olmstead Supreme Court decision of 1999. And those really important pieces of legislation have meant that people have been able to move out of more institutional settings and into their communities and participate in inclusive, integrated lives in the same way that any other person would do. They've been able to move into their own apartments or variations on the group home idea. They've been able to work in competitive employment settings with support. They've been able to pursue a higher education. And just as the rest of us, enjoy supports in order to participate in our communities in all aspects of life. Individuals with IDD also need and want supports to be able to live independently. So there's a great demand for trained professionals to help support these individuals. And that demand for those direct support professionals is going to continue to increase as we continue to push for more integration into all aspects of society for people with IDD. However, and all of that is a great signs of progress. However, the problem occurs when we have more individuals who need and want such services than we have professionals who can provide them. Part of this is because the 15,000 direct support professionals who are currently employed in the state of Missouri to provide those supports are vastly underpaid. The starting wage for DSPs as of 2018 was around $9 an hour. And the Missouri minimum wage in 2021 was about $10.30 an hour. And so the starting wage for DSPs has kept pace, obviously, with the minimum wage. And some get paid more than minimum wage, maybe $12 an hour. However, we all know, especially if we work, that that is not a sufficient wage to pay our bills, to support our families. And plus, the work that they do, as Anne and Eli have indicated, is so essential, so intimate often, requires training to do. And they're providing an essential service for people who need it. So that rate of pay is very low for the job that they're doing. These low rates mean that about 25% of direct support professionals lives in poverty. And some live above the poverty line, but are still paid very, very low wages, not sufficient to live on. Many of them are not able to access benefits in their jobs. Around 52% of DSPs access some form of government assistance in order to be able to live, such as food stamps, Medicaid. Around 31% are enrolled in Medicaid, around 32% utilize SNAP benefits. And as a consequence of the low DSP wages, as we can all imagine, if we can't sustain our own lives based on our rate of pay, we eventually may leave that line of work, even though it's essential and generally very meaningful and fulfilling for the people who do those jobs. The DSP turnover rate per year is around 56%. Approximately 38% of DSPs leave the workforce within their first year. This is a demanding job. Providing care for somebody for hours a day or for a number of individuals throughout the day, as is more likely the case, is a demanding job. Because of the low wages, the DSP job vacancy rate is around 20 or 25%. Many DSPs work overtime or work multiple jobs or both in order to pay their bills and to provide for their families. And many, as we can see from these statistics, are just ultimately forced to leave the work for higher paying jobs in other sectors. According to the Missouri Centers for Independent Living, higher wages offered at places like Walmart, where an average wage is around $14.76 an hour, or Target at $13 an hour, or Amazon for $15 an hour, even at McDonald's at $13 an hour. Many of these big corporate employers, they pay more, they offer benefits, and they draw qualified DSPs out of the industry to other jobs. And that is such a loss to the individuals we support, to our family members with IDD. I would like to invite Sherry Grodner of the ARC's Human Resources Department to jump in here if she would, and talk a little bit more and from a different perspective about the DSP crisis from a human resources perspective.
Thank you, Anne. It's great to be here today. And yes, I've been at the ARC for it'll be 2 years in June, believe it or not. And being brought on board into this role, I was advised right out of the bat, the DSP job is a very challenging position to fill, and it's very challenging to keep people in the role, particularly during the first 90 days. Generally, if people can get to the 1 year mark, they tend to stay because they really love it. But we've tried a lot of things to improve retention. We are slightly less in annual turnover in the DSPs than the state average and national average, but it's still a constant challenge for us. We try to ensure that we do a great job interviewing, be very realistic with people, make it easy for them to onboard, and then provide a lot of training and support from the point in which they join the organization. And that we offer benefits to our full-time staff, such as paid time off and medical insurance, and all those things that we can do to sort of compensate for the fact that the pay is what the pay is, because we are limited in what we can pay as a base wage. So we do lose people. It takes a lot of effort from human resources working with those hiring managers to hire folks. And I almost say it's kind of like a funnel. You start with a certain pool of applicants, and then that funnels down to folks who will actually interview with you. Then that funnels down to folks who will accept an offer. Oftentimes they don't make it to new employee orientation. Another challenge we face is getting people who are qualified for the role, because it's not just a challenging job. There are compliance issues that have to be met in terms of background and being able to drive, having access to reliable transportation. So it is a tremendous challenge. It's work that we love, but it is something that takes a lot of time and dedicated effort on the part of HR and our hiring managers to make successful hires in the DSP role.
So Sherry has brought up a number of different issues: recruitment of trained individuals to work this job, the pay, benefits. Sometimes it takes a little while, and a commitment to the work in order to reach the point where they're eligible for benefits. And there are a number of other issues involved in why it is difficult to recruit and retain individuals who are able to do this work. And one of the issues is the pay, as we've been discussing, and we've been talking about the low wages. So, Anne Mangelsdorf, what's going on with the pay, and why don't we just pay them more?
Great question. So let me get to my slide. So why aren't DSPs paid more? So community providers, such as the St. Louis ARC and others, employ DSPs through contracts paid by the state of Missouri, the Department of Mental Health, who gets Medicaid rates that are reimbursed to the agencies. And the rates are determined by Medicaid. And from there, the remaining rates are determined by the Missouri legislature and ultimately the governor. And currently the rates are set based on how much general revenue we get to supplement what we get from Medicaid. And currently, the governor has recommended that we receive as a state about $9 million. And what we are needing from the legislature is about $86 million. So you can see there's quite a discrepancy between what the agencies across the state need and what the governor is recommending. So the pay continues to be low because we cannot get a standard rate increase from the state of Missouri. So we are pretty much stuck with whatever reimbursement rate we receive from the state of Missouri. So go ahead, Ann. How can we?
So we as an organization, we can only pay the amount that we are reimbursed to pay, and we need to pay for the oversight of the programs and services that we offer, and then we also need to pay the professionals that we hire to provide the supports and services. And so essentially our programs like ours in a nonprofit organization are funded through the state. So we can only pay the amount that those entities reimburse us to pay.
Exactly.
And that sounds like that's true of probably most of the support and services providers. So it's not as simple of an issue as why don't we raise their rates?
And this is not just a concern for the St. Louis ARC. This is a nationwide concern across the country. And in Missouri specifically, which is what we're interested in, but also across the country.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
How can we solve this crisis of funding? Since legislators, it boils down to solving the problem boils down to advocating for budgetary increases for programs like ours. So since legislators set the amount paid out of general revenue to state and entities like Medicaid, legislators are in a position to help. They can help by increasing the amounts of funding that are allocated to the programs that pay for supports and services to organizations like the ARC. And we as citizens and as professionals, as family members, can help our legislators understand the issues involved by educating them about the issues. So for example, as I mentioned in the very beginning, we have such a diverse group on our call today, such as parents advocating for our young or young adult or adult children with disabilities, professionals, other community members, self-advocates. We can reach out to legislators, our district representatives or senators, for example, and sharing our stories with them and urging them to ensure adequate funding for community providers like the St. Louis ARC that serve Missourians with developmental disabilities. So as Ann Mangelsdorf mentioned a few minutes ago, we want to educate our legislators about the issues involved so that they will see the importance of allocating this $86 million for developmental disabilities rate standardization. We want to be able to compete, we as the St. Louis ARC want to be able to compete for essential direct care staff by paying wages that reflect the rising minimum wage. And so educating our legislators about the necessity of raising those wages is a first step.
What I would really like to share with you all now, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute, and I'm going to talk about the budget process. So how do you know where to, when to talk to your legislator? There's always a good time. Any time is a good time. And so I think that talking to your legislator throughout the year is really important. And so you don't have to wait for an ask. And as a lot of people say, don't wait to have a friend when you need a friend. You want to have a friend now before you need a friend. And so let's see if we can do this again.
So our friends, we want to basically become familiar with our representatives and senators, form relationships with them so that we're continually familiarizing them with issues and so that they know who we are. We have more influence with individuals with whom we have a relationship.
Very good point, Ann. And so it's important for you to know who your legislator is ahead of time. And if you are someone that works in the field, this is a great time to introduce yourself to them, especially at the very beginning of the legislative session. So let's talk a little bit about that now. So if you look at the executive budget, even before the legislature goes into session in January, in the summer through October 1st, departments like the Department of Mental Health send their budget request to the Office of Administration and the Office of Budget and Planning and the governor. So usually during the summer months, legislators are home. This is a great time to introduce yourself to your legislator because they are not quite as busy. If you are a family member, it's a great time to introduce your family. If you are an individual that works in the field, it's a great time to introduce yourself and find out a little bit more about the legislature and who's representing you. So then if we look at the governor presents the State of the State address in mid-January, and at that time he usually talks about his budget. And that is about the time that the legislature is starting to meet. So if you go to the House Budget Committee introduces the budget bills and they're sent to the House Budget Committee. And in the Senate Appropriations Committee considers the department budgets and starts looking at that. And that's January through March. Then if you go back to the House over here, the House Appropriations Committee looks at the department budgets and gives recommendations for the coming year. That's January and February. And then in February and March, the House Appropriations Committee presents their recommendations to the full Budget Committee. So throughout this entire process, starting in January, you're going to reach out to your legislator to talk to them about things that are important to you, whether that's budget issues, whether that's other types of issues related to education or others. This is the time to reach out. So in the summer, you're going to introduce yourself. In January, when they go into office, you're going to congratulate them if there's been an election, or you're going to just say hello. And then in January and February, you're going to start watching what's happening. In March, the Budget Committee presents the committee's budget to the entire House of Representatives for amendment. So it's gone through this entire process, and then in March, it's looking at the budget. So it's March. Now is the time to be reaching out to your legislatures, whether they're on the Budget Committee or not, because they are going to be looking at the budget on the House floor. Also, once they have looked at that budget, it's going to go over to the House. I'm sorry, from the House, it's going to go to the Senate, excuse me. And the Senate Appropriations Committee is going to look at that bill. And then in April, they're going to send this to the entire Senate. So oftentimes you will, as an ARC advocate, see alerts, and sometimes you'll get more than one alert. So the first alert might be to contact the House Appropriations Committee, or your first alert might be to contact the Budget Committee, or it might be to ask you to contact your legislator. And that's where we are right now in March on the House side, contacting your legislator. Excuse me. The legislators are going to go on recess for spring break. And when they come back at the end of March, after they've looked at the budget, they're going to send it over to the House. I'm sorry, I want to keep talking about the House. They're going to send it to the Senate after spring break, and you will get another alert for the Senate side. And then oftentimes, the bill has to be reconciled because what the House decided and what the Senate decided may not agree. So they come back together in the conference committee here in April or May and reach a compromise on the differences. It then goes back to the House of Representatives and the Senate floors for approval. And so in March, right now, we're asking you to contact the House. At the beginning of April, we're going to ask you to contact the Senate. Then, towards the end of April, we're going to ask you to contact both sides of the House and Senate. And then sometime in May, the governor is going to take a look at whatever the final budget is, and decide whether or not that budget's going to pass. And then he's got a limited amount of time to do that. And then it goes back to the General Assembly, which is the Senate and the House, to see if there's any overrides that are going to happen, anybody that's going to veto what the governor has recommended. So that is the Budget Committee in a nutshell for the budget process. And then I'm going to turn it back over to Ann. We're going to go back to, hold on here. Because I'm so, here's my PowerPoint. All right. So I think we're back to Ann, who is going to talk about next steps and what we want you all to do today. So hang on here. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint.
While Ann's working on that, I'm bringing up the PowerPoint. So I'm going to be talking just a little bit about communicating with your legislator. And if you've never done this before, it can feel very intimidating, and you may feel like, who am I? What do I know? What can I say with confidence to my elected official? I at least felt, as I said, intimidated and like this was a really big deal, and maybe I didn't know enough to communicate my concerns to my legislators. So Ann, is it possible to bring up the Missouri State Senate website and show them
Yes.
briefly how they can find out who their legislators are, because this can, obviously, it's a very important tool to know who to communicate with. It can also demystify the process a little bit. So for example, and I'll just talk while Anne's working on that, I realized that my representative, my state representative for my district in Missouri was actually somebody who lived in my community and that I was already familiar with. And that I already had a little bit of a relationship with that person, just by virtue of the fact that she lived nearby. And so that helped me realize that this is just a person who lives in my community. These are real people, and for the ones that represent our districts, they are people who live in our community. So rather than thinking of them as people out there who represent us, but we don't actually know who they are or might not be able to access them, I think that's a really important reminder that these are neighbors who live in our communities. So Anne has brought us to www.senate.mo.gov, to their legislator lookup tool, and she's typing in the address of the St. Louis Arc at 1177 North Warson, and she's going to look up who our legislators are for this particular district. She's entering the information, and then she hit look up legislators. So we can see here that our senator is Jill Shupp for this senatorial district. Our House district representative is Tracy McCreary. And our U.S. House representative is Cori Bush. That's a newly elected official. And our statewide elected officials are Governor Mike Parson, our Lieutenant Governor Mike Kehoe, etc. So the ones that we want to focus on for our local legislative advocacy are our local district senators and representatives. Jill Shupp, Tracy McCreary, and Cori Bush, who brings our local concerns to our federal legislature.
And for today, we're focusing on our House folks because that's where the budget is now.
Right.
And you can see when you pull up the individual, there's a picture of them, their name, when were they elected, how long have they served. You can see what bills have been sponsored. And you can look down here at the biography. So what you can find is what else Representative McCreary has been involved in. And you can kind of see what her concerns are. And so sometimes you'll find that it may be that she volunteers or is on a board that is somebody that you're affiliated with as well. Or you can also look and see what other interests and things that she has. So you can take a look at that. And then there is a way to contact her. So you will see here, here's her address. And for the most part, what we're asking people to do right now before the recess is to contact your House representative either by phone or email. So here we have Emily Bridges, who is Representative McCreary's legislative assistant. Oftentimes when you call, that is who you're going to get, is that legislative assistant, who oftentimes can be just as important, if not more than important, than your legislator. And then here you'll see that there's her email address. So you can click on there. Yes. And then we'll have a way to, well, it's going to make me do a bunch of gyrations. I know it is. So we're not going to go there.
So
Yeah.
as you can see, sometimes there are those two avenues of contacting our representatives, phone or email. And sometimes, Anne mentioned that there's a physical address for our representatives in Jefferson City. Sometimes writing them a personal letter can be extremely effective as well, especially because those letters stand out from the masses of emails that they may be getting, some of which are generated emails from organizations like ours, where sort of the outline of the email has been formulated for you and you fill in the blanks, and those are very effective. But sometimes getting a handwritten letter in the mail that expresses concerns makes a big impression on a legislator, because it stands out from the other communications they may be receiving. And what to include in whatever form of communication that you use to contact your legislator is first to think about what is your concern at the moment? What is your specific request or a piece of information that you'd like them to know about? So for example, our specific concern right now is the DSP crisis and how this affects our loved ones with disabilities as they live with independence in their communities and getting the supports that they need and want, or how it affects the people that we serve as professionals. And the first step is first to look at your own personal story. So for example, I'm a staff member at the St. Louis ARC, but I'm also the parent of a transition age teenager with developmental disabilities who attends school in special school district and who is also accessing supports and services in our community. And sometimes a personal story that one has experienced that relates to the issue at hand is a really powerful way to make a connection with your legislator. So for example, regarding the DSP crisis that we're facing right now, I might write a letter that identifies myself, and I might say that my name and that I'm a person, a citizen who lives in the district, and I have a child of transition age with developmental disabilities, and I'm concerned about the DSP crisis, that the low wages that DSPs are paid contribute to very high rates of turnover in the DSP workforce, that it's hard for us to get the DSPs when we need them, and it's hard to just access the supports and services that we need. And a personal connection to the crisis and how it has impacted our family's life, especially the life of my son with developmental disabilities, is that my son has had direct care workers in his life. Unfortunately, although almost without exception, they've all been fabulous, they tend to leave after about 6 months for other opportunities. These other opportunities may be advancement in their own careers. It may be going back to school, or it may be that they've decided to leave the work entirely because they can't sustain their own lives on the wages they're paid, etc. The result for my son and for me as his parent is that my son is just devastated by the loss of these people in his life. They may be paid professionals, but to him, they've become friends, people that he cares deeply about and who care about him. These are primary relationships that he's formed. And he feels devastated and such a sense of loss when those individuals leave, or the organization can't provide funding to continue to employ that person. It's very confusing for the individual who is being served. They don't understand why these people leave, why new ones come back, and eventually just this constant rotation of support providers. It really impacts the progress that our loved ones have made by this constant interruption of supports and services, and it may make them less safe. So this could be a personal story. I could personalize it in my letter to my representative and describe the exact circumstances, the impact that it's had. And I can also do a little research so that I feel more confident when I'm communicating with my legislator. I can educate myself a little bit more with statistics about, for example, the DSP crisis, so that I'm aware of issues that legislators think about when they consider raising rates and things like that. I want to show that I'm aware not just of my own personal story and my loved one's story, but I'm aware of some of the factors that may influence the legislators to make certain decisions. And that just enables me to speak more confidently and from a more educated perspective, which makes an impact on our representatives as well. Then
I think it's important, Anne, when you talk about that, these legislators are trying to grasp a wide range of topic areas, some of which they're very familiar with, others not so much. So many legislators do not have experience with someone with a disability and don't understand the nature of the direct support professional job or the needs of the people with disabilities that they serve. So you really do become the expert in this area. And as you move forward with what is your experiences are, they're very valid and very important and really worth sharing.
Yes, I think that's such an important part also of reducing the intimidation factor for ourselves as we communicate with our legislators. We think of them as sort of being experts on all things, and they are experts on the legislative process and on certain issues that they work directly with. But we as community members, family members, staff people for organizations, we are experts on the lives of our loved ones with disabilities, on the supports and services that we provide as an organization. And so we are actually in the position to educate our legislators about topics that they may not be as familiar with, and also to personalize those issues for our legislators so that they're not just abstract issues, but they are about individual citizens who live in their communities and they have personal and relatable stories.
At this time, I would like to challenge each and every one of you today, after we get off this call, to go ahead and write your legislator. And at this point, we're talking about your representative. We want you to write your representative today and let them know about the concerns that you have about the DSP crisis. So we're giving you each a homework task. And if for any reason you don't feel comfortable writing that email and you want someone to look at it first before you send it, Ann and I are available to do that. So at this point, our session is over, but we want to challenge each and every one of you on the call to go ahead and reach out to your House representative about this issue. So thank you all for being here today. I hope that you have the tools you need to move forward with writing your representative. And again, please reach out to Ann if you want some assistance. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, everybody. It's been great to have you all here, and we hope to hear from you.
And we are going to, we just had in the chat, please send the letter template. We are going to email you all the PowerPoint, and it'll have the statistics and information on there. And then we will also email you the recording so you can revisit this if you wish. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks again, everybody. We hope that you write fabulous letters. If you'd like to share any of those letters with us or share responses that you may get from your legislators, we would love to hear them.
Goodbye, everybody.